Hey everybody, Bob Fitzgerald, Brave Haven Media. Glad you could join us tonight. We're just going to have a little bit of fun here tonight, talking about some scary ghost stories. Halloween is coming up. It's October 2015. Today is the 6th, and every week we'll have an installment of this program so that you can join in and share your scary stories. We've got a couple of stories tonight. One's kind of humorous, one's a little bit scary, and I'll be sharing some stuff from my life and some of those things, but we hope everybody out there is doing well and everybody's doing fine out there. We are going to actually start tonight by a poem that I remember as a small child. My brother Wayne used to always recite this poem. It is the Jabberwock from Lewis Carroll. So without any further ado, we will play the Jabberwock.
'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves and the momraths outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the jub bird, and shun the frumious bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand. Long time the manxome foe he sought, so he rested by the tum-tum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in offish thought he stood, the Jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through, the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy, O frabjous day, Callooh Calais, he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the momraths outgrabe.
Love that poem. It's a nonsensical poem, but it does bring that eerie nature that is Halloween and kind of paint some pictures in your mind, which a lot of time, that's the fun of Halloween. Halloween is one of my favorite times of year. I just love that holiday. I love to see the excitement in the kids' faces as they go out trick-or-treating, tricking sometimes a little more than we would like, but it is a great time. You know, when I was a little boy, my family lived on the prison grounds at the Utah State Prison. And shortly adjacent to our home was the graveyard for prisoners whose families never claimed them. They might have been on death row and executed at the prison, and their families never claimed some of them. And so some of the stories that I'm going to share in later weeks will kind of come from my experiences at the Utah State Prison. But one I want to share tonight is kind of funny. Comes from Donald Lee Strang, and he sends me this. He says, Bob, my uncle owned a funeral home, and my Boy Scout leader arranged for me to pick up folding chairs from the funeral home for our pre-Halloween party. I talked to my uncle, and he said, just go straight when you get downstairs, and the chairs will be on your right. So I went downstairs, and straight ahead was a room with one weak light on in the back. There were tables with sheets on them, but I couldn't find any chairs. As I was passing one of the tables, I heard a gasp. Turning, I watched as a figure draped in a sheet sat up. As with all 11-year-old boys, my imagination kicked in to overdrive. I was thinking of zombies when the sheet slid off and an elderly woman and her body relaxed as she fell back, emitting a sound that I have never forgotten. It sounded like something from a movie. I ran right through the louvered door and didn't stop until I ran through the door at my house. The next day, my uncle told me that I had entered the embalming room. The lady in question had her fluids removed that day. It was not uncommon for the body to tense, as when her muscles clenched and she sat upright, and then to emit sounds when the air forced into her lungs escaped after the nerves released. Needless to say, that was my most memorable Halloween. Thanks for sharing that, Don. That's kind of a cool story and gets things going there. And we would like everybody out there to share with us your stories. You can go to Brave Haven on Facebook, like our page there, and just share your Halloween stories, your ghost stories. They don't have to be ghost stories. They could be Halloween stories, tales that you did as a child or a teenager at Halloween. The fun stuff that makes this holiday and this day and this time of year a fun thing, a precursor to the holidays that are coming our way. You know, there's so many things out there that come to my mind. One experience I will tell you is when I was a young boy, and this is again at the Utah State Prison. When I lived out there, it was in the 60s, and I was under the age of 12, and I don't remember how old I was when this experience happened. But there were cornfields. They would grow different crops there at the prison. And there were cornfields this year. The crop was corn. And whenever the crop was corn, as a kid, we would go out there and we'd make forts in the corn and all kinds of stuff. And so I had this cool fort in the middle of the cornfields. And it was, it was probably 20 feet by 20 feet. It was probably 10, 15 rows wide and about the same size as a square. And in there, you could do all kinds of stuff. You could run around. You could make all kinds of noise, and no one would bother you. So I am out there by myself, and I was probably 6 or 7, somewhere in that age group. And I'm just out there playing in the corn, and not far from my home, maybe 200-300 yards from my home, and out there in the corn, and I remember playing, and suddenly I heard a woman's voice, and it said, "Bobby!" And not really anybody called me Bobby except for some of my aunts. And I stopped what I was doing, and it was in a different direction from my house. And so I started running towards where I assumed the voice was coming from. I ran for maybe 20 or 30 seconds. And suddenly, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. And I heard the woman's voice again, this time much closer. It said, "Bobby." I stopped. I froze in my tracks. I turned around and I ran as fast as I could towards my home. I ran and I ran and I ran. And when I got to the edge of the corn and stepped out onto the dirt road where my house was, I ran across the road. I ran into my house. No one was home. And I was scared. The little boy just scared out of his wits at that experience. Don't know what the voice was. Don't know if it was somebody bad. Don't know anything. But it could have been a ghost. Could have been a ghost haunting the Utah State Prison grounds. We're going to turn to another story. This is sent to us by Richard. I work with Richard. I've known him for a long time. And he lives out in West Valley City, and that is where I work. And he sent me the following story. He says, when I was 15, I lived in Chesterfield. And Chesterfield is a neighborhood, an area, a small community within West Valley City. So this is 2320 South, just east of Redwood Road. Now, if you don't know that area, there are a lot of woods, there are a lot of different things there. There are a lot of different people that come through that area. He says, we had an old shed on our property that was right up against the canal that bordered our property I know exactly where he's talking. One fall night, my parents were out of town, and me and a friend went out in our back door, and we saw the shed lit up like we had lights in there, which there were none. As we went closer, we could see what looked like a woman floating, and it felt ice cold outside all of a sudden. We ran back into the house, locked all the doors, and turned on all the lights in the house. I called my dad, and he told me to stay inside. We didn't go back out there until my parents got home. When they got home, I showed my dad the spot, and we both had the hair on our necks stand up, and my dad said he could feel something bad. That night we tore it down and burned all the wood. My dad was so uneasy that he had our bishop come and bless our house. Scary stuff. Could be the imagination of a 15-year-old, but who knows? Well, I hope you've enjoyed this little brief presentation of ghost stories. We've got more to come. We'd like to do more each and every week. So please, if you've got an experience, a story, please share it with us. We'll also be talking about haunted places in Utah. And we want to just bring that in and everybody start thinking about that. That reminds me of one story I'm going to share. This is from Lehi, Utah. And it's a graveyard that is down in Lehi, an old pioneer graveyard. And an acquaintance of mine went to this graveyard with the intent of capturing a ghost's voice. So they had recorders and different things, camcorders and all that kind of stuff. And they went down there and they spent some time in this cemetery, Pioneer Cemetery, very old graves, down there in Lehi, Utah. Well, they were there for a while and they'd been recording things and they weren't getting anything. They were being, they'd say, okay, speak to us, blah, 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 blah. And then they'd be silent and see if they could hear anything. Nothing. So they decided, let's pack it up. This has been bogus. We've wasted some time. We had some fun out here in the graveyard at night. Ooh. And they went back and they started listening to the tape recorder. One of the devices that they had was a tape recorder, and they listened to that device. In one of the spots where they were quiet, they heard a distinct voice of a young child with a thick accent, either Irish or Scottish or British or something like that. And the voice says, I cannot find me stone. Can ye help me find me stone? Now, stone is something they used to refer to as the headstone. So, there you go. There's another scary... Man, I got tingles just sitting here talking about this stuff. Anyway, we want to have some fun with this. We're not out to scare anybody. We just want to have some good Halloween, October fun with ghost stories. And this is Bob Fitzgerald from Brave Haven Media, hoping everybody out there is safe, everybody out there is happy, and everybody, let's have a wonderful Halloween, and God bless everybody, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. We will sign off here, and don't forget to tune in next time on Brave Haven Media, Scary Ghost Stories.